Manx Radio's Countryside is brought to you by NFU Mutual.
Hello and welcome to Countryside here on Manx Radio. I'm Simon Clark.
And I'm Kirree. I popped to Santon to meet Manxman Ned Kennaugh to talk about farming in the years gone by.
And I went along to Cricket up Ronnig Way to speak to Neil Masson and his wife Vicky Sloan Masson, who farm up there with their dairy herd, and I find out the latest from what they're up to at this time of year. But firstly, we usually have a natter about the weather, how it's affecting things around the island, particularly, I'd imagine, for the market gardeners getting ready for Christmas, Kirree, you know, with the picking sprouts with them freezing cold icicles hanging off them, because the bit of frost has been touching us at the moment, and always a tricky one with keeping water troughs unfrozen and things. So, well, little things that are quite important, well, very important.
Very important. I did hear the other day that the puddles on the yard are frozen out in Dorby, and they're right on the coast. So it's interesting to see the temperatures have really dipped down now. And like you say, the water troughs and water pipes, they are a divil to keep going if the cattle aren't supping on the troughs continuously. But that said, Simon, everyone's enjoying the dry spell. It's you're able to get out on the fields and keep getting about. Hopefully the snow will stay at bay, but a busy time on the run up to Christmas in full winter routine feeding now.
It certainly is. Well, to find out the latest news from a couple of the very successful breeders and dairy farmers on the Isle of Man, I went along to Cricket and spoke to Neil Masson, his wife Vicky, and got the latest news about what they're up to at the farm at this time of year.
Well, we're headed into Christmas, so a lot of the stock are in. We've still got a few head of stock out. So it's busy, really, of feeding and clearing up after them every day.
It's been a funny time weather-wise, though, with all the rain that we've had, and the fields were pretty boggy and everywhere you're trying to get to. Now it's a bit more chilly and crispier. And I mean, do the cows find it difficult to adjust to the different weather conditions?
They actually prefer it cold. A cow in milk runs a higher temperature when she's producing milk, so they prefer the cold, really. Wet, if they're out all the time standing in muck and rain on their backs, you know, they don't like that. But this weather is ideal, really. The ones that we've still got out are in a way healthier out when we had that wet and mild weather, because if you bring them in the sheds, it creates pneumonia within the cattle. So sometimes they're better left out. As long as they're fed well and they've got a dryish field, they're better off out.
So it can be a tricky thing deciding what you're going to do, depending on the weather sometimes then? Yes,
it is tricky to balance things out, really. You don't want to overstock your sheds as well. So yeah, it's difficult. Well, obviously the milk cows are all in and the younger calves are all in. They've got to be housed at this time of year.
And what about the calving situation? I mean, I know that a lot of milk producers who breed their own tend to try and... do you have them at a certain time of year when they're going to calve?
Yeah, we tend to have two kind of groups. So we have an autumn group, which we're just got a couple of scragglers at the end, have a bit of a break over Christmas and New Year, and then start again end of January and have a group there that will calve up until the end of April, May time, and then no more till September again then. Just trying to lighten the workload, really. It's nice to have a few months off, no cows calving. They're all out at grass anyway at that time of year in the summer. Gives the sheds a break as well. Obviously, we can get all them cleaned out and disinfected, and they're just left over the summer period, so any bugs or anything disappear, ready in time for calving again. Milk profile too, obviously the creamery need kind of a level milk profile throughout the year, so
do they sort of say to you, we'll need so many litres and all that, and you've got to plan around that?
No, they don't really dictate on how many litres they should have, but it makes their job easier when the profile is level. So they know how much milk's coming in each month. So that's why most farmers will have some autumn calvers to try and keep the milk up through the winter months. Obviously it's cheaper to produce milk in the springtime because cows are out at grass, and that's your cheapest form of production. But we also need milk. Everyone needs milk in the wintertime, don't they, as well? So we need to supply customers with milk throughout the winter months as well.
And we need a hot chocolate, of course.
We do, yeah.
But how many are you milking now? It's mainly a Holstein flock that you've got, isn't it?
Yeah, Holstein, pedigree Holstein herd with a few Ayrshires which are under the children's name. For the type of farm we've got, Holsteins really suit us. We don't have a mega amount of land around the yard, so the higher producing animal, but they also, we're breeding them so that they are fit to graze, so they are capable of walking out to graze every day as well. So these girls will be doing over 4,000 litres from forage, averaging about 8,500 litres through their lactation. So we can keep a small amount of cows and get a little bit more milk from them. So we're milking about 85. Yeah.
And what about was it the kids' choice for the Ayrshires, or they just wanted to do something different when they got to that age?
I think we were at a national calf show in England, and the Ayrshires are quite pretty marked. They're red and white, obviously. They've got different unusual markings on them. Both of them said, "Oh, we're really cool." At the time we didn't have very many red and whites, and obviously Ayrshires are red and white, so you're guaranteed a red and white one. So they've got their own little herd, which are quite successful, really. They're off a really good line from the UK family, the Clover family. So it's just something different. Keep the interest in it, isn't it?
Yeah. But I mean, you must be pretty proud, because you and Neil have been really quite proud of breeding your own successful herd of Holsteins, haven't you?
Yeah, and it's something that it's another interest, isn't it? I really strive to breed cows that are really healthy, that they're going to do what you ask them to do, but also be really healthy within themselves. And all the breed traits that you pick within the Holstein breed allows you to do that. You know, if you want a really tall Holstein cow that's going to do 12,000 litres in lactation, you can breed one. If you want a smaller, more robust Holstein, that's not going to do that much more litres, but can really look after herself and go out to graze, you can do it. And the Holstein breed has been going for years and years, and they've got so much data behind them, so you can get that when you're breeding a cow. Yeah.
And Neil, turning to you, the side of it where they're in and they've got to be fed during the winter time, obviously, because there's the less grass. I mean, how does your system work with cake and things and silage? Have it?
We're on, it's partial TMR really, which is total mixed ration. They get silage and grain in the feeder wagon with the minerals, and there's a supplement in there with a yeast. And that's mixed up and goes into a trough, which they all have ad lib, and everybody gets the same in there. And then we've got the tower on the yard here, which just gives them metered amounts of cake, which is also mineralised and has got high energy.
And that's a sort of an electronic system, isn't it?
Yeah,
you've got tags on them?
That works by a transponder tag, which they have in their ear. And every cow's individually rationed, and the stalls are set up that they can't nick each other's food. They can't go in and pinch it. We do have,
because they're clever, aren't they?
Yeah. Everyone's probably seen the YouTube videos of cows working the yolks and things to unlock themselves and go along. So yeah, they can work things out. And the Impala feeders, if they give them a rattle in a certain way, it'll drop a little bit more. So it's only a few grains, but yeah, they do give them a little nudge now and again, don't they?
but it is quite a balance then, because if the amounts are wrong somewhere along the line, it affects the milk yields.
Yes, and quality and everything's monitored at the moment. The urea in the milk is monitored every week, sometimes twice a week, and everything's just sort of as streamlined as possible, really. It sounds...
2 seconds.
Yes, it's streamlined. It sounds like with 3 different feed stations that we're feeding quite a lot, but everything is fed to yield, so it's anything that's not above a certain level doesn't get any in the other 2 feeders, so they're just getting the silage and the grain in the trough, and that's maintenance plus 20 litres, and anything above that gets fed a little bit more just to tickle them along, and it's all sort of like I say, streamlined as possible.
Yeah, and it's a funny thing because it's so much science and to try and get the most out of what you've got in this day and age. And when I was young, you threw a bale of hay in the rack above them and give them a few nuts, and that was it.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got 2 separate nutritionalists working on the cow's diet.
Really?
Yes, and it's all cross-referenced and computer controlled, and everything's put into the system, and it's as efficient as we could possibly be, really.
And you're still not a millionaire.
This time next year, Rodney.
Neil Masson and Vicky Sloan Masson telling me all about what's happening on the farm at this particular time of year, and the trials and tribulations and the intricate means that farmers have to go by now with computers to monitor the feeding and trying to balance that amount of food, to which cows are producing the most milk and which aren't. It
is, like
technical.
You say, so technical and so intricate. And farming has come a long, long way. We'll hear from Ned in a moment about when he used to do the milking and how different it was there. And he talks of Vicky's dad, Kenny Sloan, and just the difference and the modernisation of it, the investment in tractors, machinery, and all the things that have revolutionised it. And there, Vicky and Neil taking it to the extreme with their wonderful prize-winning herd. Attention to detail is absolutely key there, and it's so successful, but it does cost an awful lot, and they're willing to invest.
You're listening to Countryside here on Manx Radio with Kirree Kermode and myself, Simon Clark. Well, we heard from Vicky and Neil earlier in the programme, modern farmers with all the modern technologies that they need, really, because obviously it's all labour saving, and it wasn't quite that in Ned Kennaug's days, Kirree.
Absolutely not. Ned talks of many stories of years gone by and how much he enjoyed farming growing up here on the Isle of Man. I popped down to Port Greenock there one evening to catch up with Ned to just have a reminisce of the years gone by. Well, here we are down at Port Greenock with Ned Kennaugh, a commissioner, a farmer and a man of the countryside. And it's cold out there now, Ned.
Aye, but it's winter time, isn't it? If we're going to have winter, let's have it in the winter time, and let's have summer in the summertime when you want to make hay. Stanley Gellin said to me one day, there's no point don't be afraid to cut hay when it's raining, because that's not when you want the drying. You want the drying when you're rooking.
Well, that's a fair point, isn't it?
So little things like that you learn, and every year is different, but the cold weather, it comes in winter time, and you accept. But we don't get winters as cold as we used to. We don't get nearly as much east wind now. I can remember, we didn't have modern day apparel them days. The best we had was an army overcoat out of nuisance.
Oh my word! And that said, everyone's layered up to the max now with all the puffer and the feathers and all sorts.
But them overcoats would stand 3 days rain.
Well, I know.
They would stand, but it took 3 days for them to dry out again.
And that said, Ned, is the snow on its way?
I wouldn't be afraid. I don't particularly like snow. As soon as it snows, first thing I think about is the sheep that's stuck up on the mountain. The mate has gone poor, there's not much bite in the grass, and they've got to survive up there till Easter. And I do feel sorry for the sheep up on the mountain. In the same way that when I'm driving down through Sulby or in Mackald in Ballajora, and you stop and look at the fields that go up from the road, and they're nearly going straight up, and you're thinking to yourself, there were some poor horses had to cart dung up to the top of them and plough them and ridge them, and they had no other way of doing it.
Isn't that hard to believe? The horsepower was the horses, and the farmers then, they got stuck in and they did some hard days graft.
That's right, and we got through the work. I can remember one year, I went to work at Ballygarrican when I was just not much more than 14. I abandoned school. I didn't leave school. I abandoned it. I had no interest at all in school, and I went to work there, and I'm not going to say which year it was, but there was one year we were finished the harvest the last days of August. The corn cut and all put in the last days of August.
Now, the weather these days, I don't think you'd get it all done by then.
Well,
And this is with modern machinery that can go twice as hard as maybe you were.
exactly. But we were doing our share of the work. Like, they'd be growing about 20 acres of oats. It was all oats. 2 acres of spuds and about 12, 14 acres of turnips, all thinned on your hands and knees.
My goodness.
And whitewashing the roof of the cows inside.
The pride taken, though, with the farms, Ned, it was unbelievable. The whitewash was everywhere.
Yes, it was part of your obligation. And cutting the thistles and painting the gates and trimming the hedges and building the hedges up in the lay fields when you were ploughing them. Take the fence down and build the hedge up in the lay field.
Now, that said there, Ned, this new sort of agri-environmental scheme is sort of, focusing on bits and pieces like this, but they were things that you were doing in your farming practice day in, day out.
It was the mantra, it's what everybody did. And if you didn't do it, you were criticised.
A sense of pride, I suppose, yeah?
Oh, yes. We were at a ploughing match once and somebody wasn't doing a very good job. And the other fellow that he was talking to, he said, well, don't be surprised. He said, have you seen the state of his ridges?
Oh.
But that's what it was all about. They were taking notes. There was fellas going round on a Sunday morning on the bike just to look at other fellas ploughing on the road.
Yeah.
And that made you take a pride.
And do you look now when you see the big tractors around the farms?
I do, but it's a different scenario now. I remember, I'm struggling to think who was the tenant now in Kirree. It might have been Willie Quayle, I don't know. It doesn't matter. He had a 3-footer plough, and one of the furrows wasn't doing the job it should have done because every third furrow was showing green coming down over the hill, right to the road. Okay. And I thought, what a mess. And then this fella come in with this one-pass cultivator, and you wouldn't have known. You wouldn't have known. He just chewed it all up and sowed the oats in it, and you wouldn't have known. But that wouldn't have happened in our day.
No.
That wouldn't have happened in our day.
And that said, Ned, staff in your time, was it readily available? With the neighbours all getting involved? How was it?
Absolutely. Even the fellas off the dole.
I don't think you'll find a few of them there now.
Well, there's still plenty of them, but they don't want the work. They want the money, but they don't want the work. But the fellas were going round. There was a gang going round in the winter time on the dole, cash in hand, not declaring it. But they were going round the country thrashing and following the mill. And better than that, everywhere they were going, they were getting a feed.
Yeah.
And that was part of it.
The hospitality was something I always enjoyed as a little one going about on the clipping with my dad. Oh. We used to go to various farms and sandwiches, and everyone would stop and have a hot cup of tea, and it was a done thing.
It was a social event. It was a social event going to the mill. Oh, aye. We're just looking at a picture on Facebook now of the mill thrashing at Stanley Quirk's up at Coolslew, and there's a little bit of debate as to who was there. Now, there's one or two commenting on it, and they shouldn't be because they weren't there and they didn't know. Now, I was there.
Oh, never.
I was.
So we'll have the exact answers now then.
Nearly always thrashing the week between Christmas and New Year. Nearly always thrashing that week. And
that would be cold enough then, though.
Yes, but we were getting finished. The daylight is short that time of the year, and we're getting to the bottom of a stack and starting to tidy up and look round, and here's Freddie Quirk up the ladder, stripping the thatch off another stack, and the moon coming up over the mountain. Coolslew was right in underneath the mountain. And they don't see the sun till dinner time.
I see.
And the moon is the same. They've got a different calendar up there. But it was a social event, and nobody complained about the work. It was, it made good memories. And Freddie Quirk was, you wouldn't know Freddie Quirk, Stanley's father. He was a perfect gentleman, a big man. He'd be 6 foot plus and a moustache, stood upright. And everybody respected Freddie Quirk. Stanley said sometimes they didn't have a bull, and sometimes they'd be taking the cow to the bull, and the bull was over in Kennelly, the other side of the gill. And Stanley said, it was taking us all day.
No way.
Well, you know what it would be. Everybody they'd be meeting on the road, they were stopping.
Well, you wouldn't get a bull to go that far now for all the cars that are on the road.
That's right. No, it's the cow they were taking to the bull. It's the cow they were taking to the bull. And when they were getting there, they were having dinner and then set off to go home. Freddie Quirk come to Ballygarrican one year. I was docking turnips in the field back of the house, and Freddie come up the field to me. And he says, "Do thou know where the binder pole is?" I said, "Yes." He says, "I bought the pole of Morris Laius, that was." So I took him down and showed him. So he went in, and we unhitched it off the wall, and he put it on his shoulder with the 3-horse swingle tree in it and the breast pole in the front, and he put it on his shoulder and set off to walk from Ballygarrican over to Greeba Bridge and then up to Coolslew with that pole on his shoulder.
Well,
And I said to him afterwards, "Did you manage to get home with it?" "Ah," he says, "I did." He says, "I stopped for some refreshments on the way." He said, "I went in the Hawthorn and I had 2 or 3 bottles of Worthington." He said, "It's the best laxative I'm getting." Things that were important. You know, it may sound nonsense to some people, but that's what was important to them people. Yeah. That's what was important.
And that said, life was very different to what it is now, Ned.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the attitude towards... Up here, I wrote a book. In my head, I'm waiting for a device, and I think you'll probably know more about this than me, that will take what I'm saying and put it down in print. I'm not going to start to write it out in longhand, because I'm uneducated and I can't spell.
Now that's a good excuse, you mean?
But the theme that runs through it all is the farmer's commitment to the livestock. When he goes away from home, his abiding mantra is to get back to the animals. He's dependent on the animals, and the animals are dependent on him. Yeah. And it's a relationship that you cannot buy, you cannot learn. You've either got it or you haven't got it. I remember John saying once when Graham Watterson won the Supreme Award at the show, and the first thing he done when he said he kissed the beast, and John said it may seem like nonsense, but it showed his commitment to the animals. Yes. And you've got to have that. Yeah. You've got to have that. You know, you've got to go out at night and give them a bit of supper before you go to bed. And in the morning, people make nonsense of it, like we always done the feeding for breakfast in the morning. Mm-hmm. Now that done 2 things that was worthwhile. First of all, you fulfilled your obligation to the animal, but it also give you an appetite for your own breakfast when you come in.
There we are. That was a wonderful chat with Manxman Ned Kennaugh down at Port Greenock.
Yeah, and just so passionate about explaining his love of the farm and the animals that he still has, isn't it? It's never gone. It's never gone.
Like he said there, it never goes. You're responsible for them, and they responsible for you for a living, as he was growing up on the family farm there out in St John's. And it's just wonderful, the stories and the names and how the community was back then, and how it's changed somewhat since, but always remaining positive there was Ned.
Yeah, it's the way that they close their eyes and sort of look to the sky, and the smile comes on their face when they remember telling you about it, isn't it? It's so heartwarming. It
is really, really was, Simon, and an absolute pleasure to listen to him, and hopefully we will have a little bit more as we go on. But like he says, he wants to write a book, and the memories he has in his, 80-odd years maybe, may we say it, a delight to be privileged with an insight in the years gone by. It was a lovely chat.
Great stuff. Well, that's it for this week's Countryside. Don't forget, if you missed a part of it or want to hear bits of it in full, you can go to Manx Radio's website and download the podcast. Well, you don't need to download it. Click on it. It'll play it if you've got time to listen to it again. And we'll be back next week with the last in the current series. So until then, from me, Simon Clark.
And me, Kirree Kermode.
We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.